What's up, folks? I am Kevin Iole. Kind of a bittersweet day today. Queen Elizabeth II has passed away as we record this, and we send our best wishes to everybody affected by this. I am joined now by Dana White. The good news is UFC 279 just a couple of days away. Dana, just before we started recording, I mentioned that the Queen had passed, and you said that you hadn't met her, but you had met someone in the royal family.
Yeah, her husband. I used to work at the Boston Harbor Hotel, and there's a picture on the internet. I don't know where the hell it came from. I think it came from the hotel of me standing beside him when he arrived at the hotel. Yeah, and yeah, no, what a life she lived, though. Incredible.
What a life you live to meet those kind of people, right? That's just
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Well, let's talk about UFC 279, the good stuff. Nate Diaz in what may be his final fight, headlining against Khamzat Chimaev, minus 1,200 for Chimaev as a favorite. Let's start there. Were you surprised to see the number that was put up?
You see the numbers every Tuesday on the Contender Series.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been beating people over the head for the last few weeks. There's like 6-1 favorites that are losing on the Contender Series. There is no 6 or 12-1 favorite in MMA, man. Anything is possible. Juliana Pena just showed it. Many other people in the past have shown it. Nate Diaz was a huge underdog against Conor McGregor when they fought. The list goes on and on. Nate Diaz is a veteran. He's been around for a long time, fought all the best in the world. And if this thing gets out of the second round, it's a very interesting fight.
Before we get specifically into the fight, I want to ask you this, because this is something that I think the UFC and your matchmakers deserve a lot of credit for, and maybe people don't realize. But, in the main event, what has Diaz lost? 3 of his last 4. In the co-main event, you've got Tony Ferguson, who lost 4 in a row. Kevin Holland is in the card. He had lost a couple before winning his last 2. And yet these guys are remaining stars and remaining big names and being able to be on top of the card. What is the secret to that, to keep somebody relevant even as they're losing fights?
Well, the secret is they're fighting all the best in the world. It's not like you lost to some random unknown guy or some unranked guy. I mean, you're fighting the likes of Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier, Oliveira, Chandler. I mean, they fight the best in the world. We were just talking about this the other day in a matchmaking meeting. I can't remember what her loss record is, but Michelle Waterson, is in the same position.
Right.
She's lost like I don't know, 5 of her last 6 or something like that. She's ranked number 11.
Right.
She's fought all the best women in the world. So it's tough to, when you're fighting the absolute best, and that's what people want to see. This weekend, first of all, highest embedded series of the year this week. Our social media, everything we post is off the charts. We posted the commercial for Chimaev Diaz, and it did 2 million views. The commercial, right? The gate, I told you a few days ago, the gate was going to hit 5 million. The gate's at 5.5 million, and it's going to be another sellout. And the list goes on and on. People want to see a fight with 2 badass dudes that want to fight. And that's what you're getting on Saturday night.
The growth of Diaz is amazing as a star. Like, I was going back and looking at some of his old fights, and there was a couple where he got booed in the fights. Marcus Davis fight, I remember, in Boston, where, the crowd roundly booed Diaz several times, during that fight. And now
Davis is from Boston.
I get it, from Maine, but yeah, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess what I was going to get at is now, Nate's like this, almost like this beloved figure, right? And, he's become this huge star that you can, hey, how many other guys have you had headlining fights, if anybody, in a non-title fight, but Nate Diaz, right? I mean, it's just amazing, what he's become. Where do you think?
At the time when he fought Diaz, he was living and training in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just the growth of Diaz, like, into this star. What do you think the trick was? Was it, was it his attitude? Was it how he fought, who he fought? Like, I think, like, part of it, like, I think of the Benson Henderson thing when he does the double bird during the fight. Like, he's fighting a tough guy in the middle of the fight and he flips it up to the crowd. I think that it was like sort of an appealing thing to a lot of people. Like, this guy doesn't care about anything. He's going to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it.
Yeah, I think that's it. His whole anti the company, anti everything, you know, willingness to fight anybody. The list goes on and on. I mean, the Diaz brothers are so intriguing. I was talking to this guy yesterday, old guy, he's got to be in his 70s. And I mentioned the fight this weekend. He's like, oh, yeah, I love the Diaz brothers. I couldn't even believe this guy knew who the Diaz brothers were. But yeah, I mean, everybody loves them.
It is just amazing. And the thing about Nate, I think, as you look at Khamzat fighting him, like Nate is a difficult guy to finish, right? Nate is not a guy that, is getting finished. I mean, how many times has he been finished in his career? 2 by knockout and one by submission. And
he's never really been knocked out.
Right. Stopped, in 30
right.
and 33 fights, right? So
right.
A very low percentage of the time he's getting finished. I mean, so the guy is incredibly tough. To me,
incredibly tough.
I wrote a column today and I said, is there pressure building on Chimaev? Because, normally, and I think about that press conference with Gerald Meerschaert, and you were at the press conference, and he was trash talking everybody, not just Meerschaert, but everybody on the dais. He was loud. Now, yesterday he was speaking in a whisper. He was not, not as outspoken. I'm wondering, hey, is the pressure of being the headliner of a UFC pay-per-view and fighting Nate Diaz in such a significant fight starting to wear on him?
Listen, if he didn't feel the pressure against Gilbert Burns, I don't know if there's pressure for this one. I think that what you've seen over time is Chimaev grow as a fight. I mean, when we saw him on Fight Island, nobody knew who the hell he was. He came out of nowhere. I mean, the guy has blown up. He's incredibly famous now, and I highly doubt he's feeling any unnormal type of pressure that any of these kids feel when they go in, on a weekend like this. And Diaz, the whole narrative behind Diaz is he's got nothing to lose, but that's not true. That's not true in this sport.
How is it not true? You got in his final fight, he has nothing to lose.
Well, because we all have something to lose when you're in this sport. You know what I mean? It's one-on-one in front of the whole world. There's nothing like it. And losing is never good in this sport. You want to win. And obviously there's a lot more upside for Nate in many, many ways, and for Khamzat and everybody else this weekend if you win.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Clarify something. So Nate is, he had a great interview with ESPN. Brett Okamoto did, I thought, a fabulous job interviewing him the other day. One of the things he said, though, kind of stuck out to me. He said, the UFC pushed me to take this fight. They were trying to act like I wanted this fight, and I did not want the fight, no way, shape, or form. Now, I think I told you this before, but Zach Rosenfeld, his manager, said to me when the fight was made, this is important to note, he said, we weren't offered this fight. We asked for this fight. So what is the truth? Did the Diaz side ask for the fight, or did you offer the fight to them first?
We offered them lots of fights. Everybody kept saying, how come the Diaz fight is blah, 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 blah. How do you want me to answer? I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
For me to say, listen, his manager told you what the deal was. For me to say anything about what the Diaz brothers are thinking, or what was this or what was that, he wanted to fight Francis. It's all part of the process when you deal with the Diaz brothers and other guys here too. You know what I mean? What matters is the fight's happening this weekend. It's a big deal, and that's it. That's all I care about.
You have a lot of your ex-fighters now going into promotions, of course. Habib has had a successful promotion, and his company seems to be doing good. Nate says he's getting into promotion. He told me there was going to be jiu-jitsu fights, boxing matches, MMA, kind of a mixture of all the martial arts going in. What do you think is going to be the biggest thing that surprises him as if in fact this gets off the ground and he gets into this?
That it's not as easy as it looks, and when you would show up at the UFC events, you realize how smooth everything ran and how professionally it's run, and how hard it is to pull that off.
Has Habib made any comments?
Can't wait till he starts dealing with fighters, if he's going to be the guy that's actually going to deal with them.
I have a feeling that he's going to just look to let somebody else do that and show up at the fights and enjoy the fights. That's my guess.
I'm with you.
Has Habib made any comment about that to you, by the way? Like, has he come back and said, Dana, I did not understand how much went on that I wasn't aware of?
Well, he and I really haven't had the opportunity to sit down and talk about that yet. But I promise you he will when we do talk.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. The Tony Ferguson fight is, to me, is a fascinating fight. And like Ferguson's been one of the OGs of this sport and put on some incredible fights. But as I mentioned before, he has a series of losses. You're putting him maybe down a notch in terms of opposition, in my mind, in Li Jingliang. Not quite as dangerous as the Justin Gaethjes and guys like that, right? I'm not dogging Jingliang, saying I just don't think he's quite as dangerous as, say, a Justin Gaethje or Charles Oliveira, right?
Well, he's up a weight class. He's up a weight class, and you're still talking about a guy that's ranked in the top 15.
So my question to start, is like, what do you think the pressure is on Tony Ferguson? Because now he's getting a chance, almost like a reset. You move divisions. You're not fighting a guy that's a top 5 contender like what he's been fighting before. You're getting a little bit of a break. Relatively speaking, right? So there's a lot of pressure on Ferguson in this fight, don't you believe?
No, I disagree. I actually think that moving up a weight class in this sport is a very, very big deal. And Leach is very exciting and very talented and very well-rounded. I actually think that this fight is going to be an absolute knockdown, drag him out war, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah. And then you go.
And again, I don't know if Tony or Leach are feeling any more pressure than they normally do on any normal fight weekend.
So if Tony, let's just say for the sake of argument, Tony loses the fight and he's got 5 in a row. Do you have any hesitation about if he wants to continue to fight? I know you get to a point with Chuck Liddell and Donald Cerrone and certain fighters that you have that conversation with. Is Tony at that point, or is he in that conversation?
I'd have to see the fight first. It's like saying, he just lost his last fight. Are you thinking about whatever? He looked incredible in that fight right up until he got knocked out. He got hit with a kick that anybody in the sport could get hit with.
Correct.
And he looked incredible right up until that point.
The last fight I believe you put on this card, I believe it was the last one or the next to last one, was one that I think is really kind of a sleeper fight on this card, Kevin Holland against Daniel Rodriguez.
I agree.
That was one you put on late. And I think there's a lot of good storylines about both of them. But let's talk about D-Rod for a second first. For people who not have seen Daniel Rodriguez fight, what can they expect out of him? What kind of fighter is he?
Yeah, no, listen, both of these guys are exciting, dynamic. Both go in there for the finish. I just saw an interview with Rodriguez. And the other thing too, stepping in short notice, catch weight fight. I don't know. It's interesting, but for all the people out there, if you don't know Kevin Holland or you don't know Daniel Rodriguez, believe me when I tell you, folks, you are in for an incredible fight. Daniel's like 16-2, and what fascinated me the most was watching the interview that he just did, the confidence that he has going into this fight. And he's pumped for this fight, and he knows that taking out somebody like Kevin Holland is a game changer for him. So this card is awesome. I mean, this card is awesome. This is going to be a fun night on Saturday.
The reason I like the Rodriguez Holland fight is because, Holland dropped back down after he had the great year with the 5 wins. He was fighting at 85, dropped back down to 170, and he's had back-to-back wins now, Alex Oliveira and Tim Means. And I thought looked great in the Tim Means fight, right? I thought it was fantastic in that fight. And he looks like the guy that maybe we thought when he won the 5 fights in the 1 year, and then people were saying, hey, maybe he's going to be a big star in this sport. He did the opposite of what Tony Ferguson's doing. Tony Ferguson's going up. He went down. That to me seems a very smart decision by Kevin Holland.
Right. And also tough to do. But the one thing, what we saw from Kevin Holland was he had a big hole in his game, his wrestling.
Right.
He needed to take some time off, really focus on his wrestling, He's done that, and be interesting to see what happens with him now in the near future. But this kid is all action, all excitement, takes risks, isn't afraid to get himself into bad positions, which is part of the reason he's so fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I think. Would you agree, like, because he had, he stepped in on short notice on a couple of fights and won him that one year when he won the 5 in a row, that maybe, the hype got a little too high on him, and, he wasn't a finished product yet. And now we're starting to see maybe what the finished product really is.
Well, I think you don't know that big of a hole is in your game until you start climbing up the ladder and facing the best in the world. Once you start fighting some of these guys that are the best in the world, start realizing, where there might be some holes in your game. But this kid's incredibly talented. Now he's more well-rounded than he was. Let's not forget, he knocked out Jacare from the bottom, which is insane.
That was one of the best finishes of the year. Yeah, that was tremendous.
100%. This fight's going to be an absolute war.
Yeah, I love that one. Hey, I got a couple more minutes with you. Just go over a couple other things. Ciryl Gane's performance. Yeah, I didn't hear you speak about that publicly. I thought that was an incredible fight. I texted you right after the fight ended, but I just wanted you to share your thoughts with the public on the Gane to Tuivasa fight and maybe where you go with Ciryl after that great win.
Yeah, he looked incredible. The one thing that we found out, listen, we always knew Ciryl was very technical, moves like a middleweight, all the things that we already know about him. We found out about his chin and his heart on Saturday night, man. He took some big shots, ate them, got hurt once, got back up on his feet, and handled his business, man. That fight was incredible, especially for two heavyweights, man. It was awesome. So, yeah, I think coming out of that fight, that's the thing that we learned. We already knew a lot of things about Ciryl as far as talent and everything else, but chin and heart is what we found out on Saturday.
Dana, I've covered fights in boxing and MMA, for kickboxing for a long time. And the one thing you don't see that Ciryl did on Saturday was he got badly hurt and got dropped. He pops up and immediately was the aggressor, right? There was no clear my head for a few seconds, move around. He immediately threw the kick at Ty and went after him. And to me, I mean, that said a lot just in that one sequence, what he did.
100%. Getting dropped like that didn't make him gun shy, didn't make him veer from his game plan. He stayed aggressive and kept doing what he was doing and eventually won the fight. I mean, the kicks to the body were unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, that is tough. So he's out several months with a broken hand. So where does that leave you with your heavyweight division, Francis? I talked to Eric Nixick the other day. Eric Nixick says France is probably better to fight in early 2023. So where does that leave the heavyweight division right now? Is anything going to happen?
We're rolling into the end of the year here. Let some guys heal up, and we're not in a bad spot. Everything's good. Listen, injuries are going to happen. These type of things are part of the sport, and we'll work through it.
What are the odds that we see Jones Miocic for an interim title in December, say?
I don't know.
Have you guys talked about that? Is that a fight that's...
Yeah, it's we've been talking about a lot of things, but talking and getting shit done are two different things.
Right. And what's fill me in on Stipe, right? Because he's always kind of everybody talks about John. What's John going to do, right? Stipe hasn't fought, since he lost to Francis. Kind of almost fell off the face of the earth. It's been 16 months, I think, since we've seen him. What is going on with him? Why hasn't he fought subsequently?
Well, if you look at what Stipe's accomplished in his career, and he's the number 2 guy in the world, plus he's got a job, that he loves in his hometown. He's a fireman, and the guy's made a lot of money. He's got a good life. He just had some kids. He's doing his thing. He's at that point in his career where he's like, bring me something big and I'll jump back in the gym and work for you. He's probably a couple fights from retiring. So, yeah.
It just strikes me, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but John Jones is something big, right? If you offer John Jones, I mean, come on.
100%.
So that just makes me...
I love how easy you guys think this is always. Oh, well, make the John Jones fight. Get that shit done.
I didn't say it's easy. I was asking a question.
Yeah. Trust me. when it's time for me to make John Jones versus Stipe, John Jones versus Francis, John Jones versus anybody, nobody will be happier and more excited to announce it and let you know it's happening than me.
Hey, one or two other questions. John will be on a very long layoff, right? And I know you have said repeatedly that you're a believer in ring rust.
Big believer.
And I've been thinking about that, and like, look at Nate Diaz, right? 3 years off, bingo, he comes in, beats Anthony Pettis, gets on this late resurgence that he's on in his late career. So to me, I think, if I say, hey, who's the better athlete, who's the better fighter, Nate Diaz or John Jones? Of course, it's got to be John Jones. So if Nate Diaz can overcome that lengthy layoff, would you agree that, John Jones would be able to handle that better than most other people?
I think John Jones handles a lot of things better than most people. John Jones is an absolute freak of nature.
Right.
He's literally a genetic freak. So, yeah, possibly.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we will end it right there. Dana, I appreciate your time as always. UFC 279 on Saturday at T-Mobile Arena. You said the gate is at 5.5 million. Are we going to get to like 20,000 on attendance? What are you looking at there?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a sellout. It's going to be another sellout. It's like our 24th or 25th straight sellout. Yeah, excited.
Going to be fun.
Going to be rocking on Saturday night.
Rocking at T-Mobile. Well, I will be there ringside. I will see you later today at the press conference. Dana, thank you so much.
Have a good day, buddy.